Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Iran has warned the US and Israel against any adventurous measures against Tehran after killing of scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. In a letter to the UN, Iran's envoy Majid Takhtravanchi said Tehran reserves rights to take all necessary measures to defend its people. Meanwhile, Revolutionary Guards Corps Commander Hossein Salami said Tehran will avenge the assassination. A U.S. federal appeals court has dismissed Trump campaign's lawsuit that sought to block Joe Biden's election win in Pennsylvania. Three-judge panel ruled that charges required specific allegations and proof, none offered by Trump's lawsuit. The battleground state certified Biden's win by 80,000 votes this week. At least 7 people have been killed in a suicide attack in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. Police said 10 others were wounded as the blast went off in a popular ice cream shop near an international airport. This comes only hours after U.S. Acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller made an unannounced visit to the Somali capital. Ethiopian military says it has seized the control of Wikru town near Tigrayan capital Mekelle. The military says national defense forces have taken control of the strategic locations to capture the capital. This comes after Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed declared the final phase of an offensive against Tigray's People Liberation Front. Coronavirus infections in the U.S. have shot past 13 million while claiming over 264,000 lives in the country. India's COVID-19 infections have topped 9.3 million with over 41,000 new cases and 485 deaths overnight. Pakistan has registered over 3,000 cases and 45 fatalities overnight as the death toll tops 7,900. Globally, the COVID-19 death toll has exceeded 1.4 million with over 61.5 million infections. And in cricket, England beat South Africa in the first 2020 of the 3-match series at Newlands, Cape Town. The visitors chased a 180-run target with 4 balls to spare and 5 wickets in hand. Johnny Bairstow was declared man of the match for his match-winning innings of 86 runs on only 48 deliveries. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. Iran has warned the US and Israel against any adventurous measures against Tehran after killing of scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. In a letter to the UN, Iran's envoy Majid Takhtravanchi said Tehran reserves rights to take all necessary measures to defend its people. Revolutionary Guard Corps Commander Hossein Salami said Tehran will avenge the assassination. Military advisor to Supreme Commander Hossein Degan said Iran will strike as thunder at the killers of Fakhrizadeh. He said Zionists seek to provoke Iran to wage a full-fledged war in last days of US President Donald Trump in the office. Iranian media claims Trump has endorsed Israel's involvement in assassination after he retweeted an Israeli journalist tweet which claimed that Fakhrizadeh was wanted by Mossad for many years. Meanwhile, Hezbollah says Fakhrizadeh's assassination perpetrated by America and Israel is declaration of war in Iran and the region. But he said the retaliation to this crime remains in the hands of those concerned in Iran. Earlier, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged restraint as tensions flared after Iran's nuclear program's architect was assassinated near Tehran. In southern Iraq, 4 people have been shot dead and 51 others wounded during clashes in anti-government protest. Violence erupted as cleric Muqtada al-Sadr supporters hit the streets of capital Baghdad and the southern city of Nasiriyah. Thousands of Sadr followers fired gunshots and threw petrol bombs at the protester tents at southern al-Haboubi Square. The protesters' leader said Sadr supporters were armed with guns and pistols. Prime Minister Mustafa al-Khadimi has plans to hold early elections in an effort to calm the protesters. A U.S. federal appeals court has dismissed Trump campaign's lawsuit that sought to block Joe Biden's election win in Pennsylvania. A 3-judge panel ruled that charges required specific allegations and proof, none offered by Trump's lawsuit. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals had been asked to dismiss the Trump campaign's attempts to invalidate millions of mail-in votes in Pennsylvania. Circuit Judge Stephanos Bibas, on behalf of the panel, termed free and fair elections lifeblood of democracy. Bibas said charges of unfairness were serious, but this case was without merit as no evidence was presented. In a tweet following the decision, Trump campaign lawyer Jenna Ellis said they will go to the Supreme Court. The battleground state certified Biden's win by 80,000 votes earlier this week. Meanwhile, a recount in Wisconsin demanded by Trump campaign ended, increasing President-elect Joe Biden's victory margin. The developments have dealt major blows to Trump's attempt to overturn presidential election outcome. In another development, former U.S. cybersecurity director has termed Trump's election fraud allegations farcical. In an interview, Chris Krebs said the allegations of foreign countries manipulating voting machines were baseless. Time is running out on U.S. President as states have until December 8 to resolve election disputes. At least 7 people have been killed in a suicide attack in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. Police said 10 others were wounded as the blast went off in an ice cream shop near an international airport. The Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab extremist group has claimed responsibility for the attack. The attack comes only hours after U.S. Acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller made an unannounced visit to Mogadishu. Last week in Mogadishu, a suicide attack killed 5 people, including Somalia's military and police officials. The fresh wave of violence in Somalia has erupted after reports that U.S. plans to withdraw its military personnel from the country. Ethiopian military says it has seized control of Wikro town near Tigrayan capital, Mekelle. The military says national defense forces have taken control of the strategic locations to capture the capital. A military top official said the troops fighting against Tigray's People Liberation Front will be able to control Mekelle in a few days. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has again ruled out dialogue with the leaders of the Liberation Front. In a meeting with 3 African Union envoys, Abiy said he is willing to speak only to the representatives operating legally in Tigray. This comes after the government declared the final phase of an offensive against the Liberation Front. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the OIC must play its part to stop Indian atrocities in occupied Kashmir. Addressing a meeting of OIC Council of Foreign Ministers in Niger, Qureshi said the far-right Indian government is systematically targeting over 180 million Indian Muslims. The Foreign Minister also raised the issue of Indian state sponsorship of terrorism in Pakistan. Commenting on a rising Islamophobia in the West, he said defamation of Islam can't be justified under the rules of freedom of expression. He also reiterated Pakistan's abiding commitment to the Palestinian people. Coronavirus infections in the U.S. have shot past 13 million while claiming over 264,000 lives in the country. Globally, the COVID-19 death toll has exceeded 1.4 million with over 61.5 million infections. India's COVID-19 infections have topped 9.3 million with over 41,000 new cases and 485 deaths overnight. In Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said majority of the country's population will be vaccinated by September next year. Italy's death toll remains second highest in Europe as the country reported over 800 deaths for a second consecutive day. The World Health Organization has urged countries to stay vigilant even if they see a fall in their coronavirus cases. In Pakistan, 14 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to over 7,900. The Health Ministry says more than 3,000 tested positive for the disease overnight. The ministry said there are more than 46,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of over 392,000 countrywide cases, more than 337,000 have recovered so far. The highest number of infections are reported in Sindh with over 170,000 cases, while Punjab has reported over 117,000 cases. In the capital city Islamabad, over 29,000 have been infected so far. In Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, protesters have called for a boycott of the District Development Council and Panchayat elections. Jammu and Kashmir People's League urged the public masses to boycott the so-called elections from the oppressor's side. In a statement, the League said casting vote is a treason with the blood of Kashmiri martyrs. It appealed to the people of occupied Kashmir to be aware and cautious of these new Indian political maneuverings. The National Conference and the People Democratic Party have also boycotted the local body elections. Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko says he will step down once a new constitution is adopted. During a meeting in Minsk, Lukashenko said he is not amending the constitution for himself and will leave office under the reformed constitution. Lukashenko said the constitution needs reforms as too much power has been given in the hands of the president. He pledged to conduct fair elections free from any fabrications under the new constitution. He added it will be worse if a war is imposed on the country, and the situation is better now without a war. Demonstrators protesting since the August polls have dismissed the presidential call for reform as a stalling tactic. In Chile, hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Santiago, calling on the government to bring reforms and control inequality in the country. Riot police used water cannons to disperse the demonstrators. The South American country has been witnessing protests for more than a year now. The unabating demonstrations call for reforms to pension, healthcare, and education systems. Earlier last month, Chileans voted in favor of a new charter to replace country's Pinochet-era constitution. American singer CHER has arrived in Pakistan to send off the lonely elephant KAAVAN. The elephant will be set off far for a new life in Cambodia this weekend. After years of campaigning by U.S. pop star CHER and animal rights advocates, the 36-year-old Asian elephant is finally to be airlifted from Islamabad's dilapidated zoo to an elephant sanctuary in Cambodia. Meeting Prime Minister Imran Khan, CHER thanked him for making it possible to take KAAVAN to Cambodia. KAAVAN has been trained for weeks with international specialists to get him used to of the small enclosure and loud noises expected on the 10-hour flight to Cambodia. A delegation of Indian Sikh pilgrims has arrived in Pakistan to take part in the celebrations of Guru Nanak's 551st birthday. Guru Nanak was born in Nankana Sahib in 1469. Sikhs across the world will celebrate the birth of first Sikh Guru on the 30th of November as Guru Nanak Jayanti. This year, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, Pakistan approved visas of 325 pilgrims. The first delegation of its kind since the outbreak is visiting Pakistan from November 27 to December 1st.
Due to the coronavirus pandemic, permission has been granted to visit only Nankana Sahib, but devotees had this desire to visit Panja Sahib, Sacha Sauda and Sri Kartarpur Sahib.
And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now moving on to the United Nations Relief Agency for Palestine Refugees has warned that it is on the cliff's edge due to lack of funding. The financial needs have been compounded by the pandemic and the U.S. move of ending funds of UNRWA. More in the following report.
The United Nations Relief Agency for Palestinian Refugees is at the brink of collapse due to the non-availability of required funds. UNRWA provides its services to about 5.3 million Palestinian refugees, but it is suffering from a stifling financial crisis since the United States has frozen all of its support for the agency since January. The U.S. claims that it is not satisfied with the way the agency works, which is being criticized by Israel. Speaking at a news conference, UNRWA's Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarani says the agency is on the cliff's edge due to the lack of funding.
If you go from one country to the other one, you will meet despair and distress. And I do believe, and this is a message I am conveying to the international community, there is no better investment than investing in UNRWA and in the human development of Palestinian refugees if you want to invest in stability in the region at a time the region is as volatile as it is.
He said this year UNRWA received the lowest level of contributions since 2012. Lazzarani says the pandemic has also affected the agency's response to refugees.
This is taking place at a time our 28,000 staff have been the front responder of COVID-19 and its impact, have been the front responder of a number of crises here in the region. At a time they have paid a high toll when it comes to the COVID, including through death. At a time the communities are also paying a very high toll when it comes to the impact of the pandemic.
Lazzarani urges the international community to step up its support immediately. He also announced to call for an international conference next year to talk about the future of UNRWA. The UNRWA's Commissioner General reiterates the agency's assurance of continuing to provide services to Palestinian refugees.
In Iraq, a team of 50 members is practicing Japanese martial arts ninja in deep mountains. Without availability of basic facilities, they have aimed to participate in international competitions and become well known around the world. More in the following report.
Dressed up in traditional Japanese martial arts ninja, a team of 50 members practices a mixture of acrobatic and combat techniques in Iraq. They use shouting, fire, and spears to boost their strength and performance.
We are the Soran Ninja team, and we established the team 3 months ago.
Despite lack of support and facilities, these athletes have to leap over many other obstacles.
The difference between training inside the hall and in nature is that in the hall there are only 4 walls and nothing happens within these 4 walls. Outside in nature it is better physically and mentally because you have to adapt to the climate. A ninja needs cold, hot and mild weather to develop the capacity to deal with any weather.
The team hopes to participate in international competitions and become well known around the world.
And now moving on to the business stories, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin have discussed progress in the UK-EU trade negotiations. Over a phone call, Johnson presented his commitment to reach a deal that respects the sovereignty of the country. In a statement, the UK government said the leaders reaffirmed to prioritise the 1998 Good Friday peace deal. The deal effectively ended Northern Ireland's 30 years of sectarian violence and created institutions for cross-border cooperation. Ireland's Prime Minister has said there is still time for a good result in trade talks. Meanwhile, European Union Brexit chief negotiator Michel Barnier has arrived in London for face-to-face Brexit trade talks. China says it will introduce a total ban on the import of any solid waste starting from the beginning of 2021. This comes in a notifier jointly issued by the Environment and Commerce Ministries. The notice said breach of the law may entail criminal liability. It said any import of solid waste will be stopped and the storage. The notice added recycling of foreign solid waste on its territory will be prohibited from 2021. For its industrial development in the 1990s, China increasingly needed raw material, forcing the country to accumulate large solid waste. But since 2017, China has begun to ban the import of some types of solid waste to improve the environmental situation. In cricket, England beat South Africa in the first 2020 of the three-match series at Newlands, Cape Town. The visitors chased a 180-run target with 4 balls to spare and 5 wickets in hand. South Africa managed a total of 179 runs on a loss of 6 after being put into the bat first. Faf du Plessis top scored for the Proteas with 58 runs on 40 deliveries. In reply, England were 3 for 34 when Johnny Bairstow came to the rescue. Bairstow was declared man of the match for his match-winning innings of 86 runs on only 48 deliveries. The second 2020 of the series will be played in Paarl on Sunday. One more member of the Pakistan cricket team has tested positive for COVID-19, taking the overall infections tally to 7. 6 of the 53 members of the group had tested positive for the coronavirus upon their arrival in New Zealand. The New Zealand Cricket Board has already revoked Pakistan team's exemption to train in quarantine. It will remain on hold pending consideration by health officials, which is expected to take until next week. The first 2020 is slated for the 18th of December at Auckland, while the last test will be played at Christchurch on 3rd of January. In football, Newcastle United beat Crystal Palace 2-0 in the Premier League clash at Selhurst Park Stadium. Callum Wilson and Joe Linton scored goals for the Magpies. Joe Linton set up Callum Wilson for the first in the 88th minute and added his side's second a minute and a half later. It was Joe Linton's first Premier League goal of the season and a third in the top 5 since joining Newcastle in July last year. Joe Linton had got 16 Premier League games without a goal for assist before grabbing one of each in Friday's victory. The result moves Newcastle up to 10th in the table, while Palace slipped to 13th. And now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.